Well, I can
Okay.
see we have a few viewers. Probably one of them's you, and then maybe a couple of your people. So hello to everybody. We're about to start our recording our show, which is going to be broadcast on the radio in a few days. You tell me when you're ready to start the official recording, Tagen.
Yeah, sorry. Um, yeah, do you want me to keep an eye on comments and stuff? Or
Sure, if you
no?
want to. I'll keep an eye too. Yeah, if anyone has any comments or questions, please put them in there, and we'll try and notice them. Uh, okay,
Okay,
so you ready to go?
let's go.
Welcome to the Canadian Philosophy Show. I'm Michael Robert Caditz, and my co-host today is Tagen Marshall. Tagen is a student at Vancouver Island University here in Nanaimo. I am a alumnus of Vancouver Island University. Tagen and I have done a few shows together, and they always work out pretty well. So I'm looking forward to today's show. First of all, I want to say Happy New Year to everybody. It's a very dark, gray, rainy, windy day here in Nanaimo. And Tagen, how are you today, and Happy New Year?
I'm doing well, Mikey. Thank you. Happy New Year to you as well. Happy New Year to our viewers. It's always good to be here with you, and yeah, I'm doing well. Had a good Christmas, a good New Year's. How about you? Did you have a good holiday season?
Yeah, I followed all the instructions, and I didn't do any partying or socializing other than in my bubble at home. So
Yeah.
I have a clear conscience.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think before we get into our topic of human resilience, which you could say that this holiday season has definitely been one where we've had to adapt and kind of change the way we do social ventures. Um, I think this whole holiday season, although it's been difficult for many, it's kind of helped us as a group, as a society, to kind of refocus on what's important. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, that's the optimist speaking, the cup half full speaking. And I tend to waver between being an optimist and a pessimist. Some mornings I wake up and I just dread having to face the all the uncertainties. Uncertainty really is really what gets me. The uncertainty about what my life will look like, what the society will look like, what the country will look like, the welfare of other people. Whether my friends or loved ones or just anyone will have to endure any suffering because of this continuing pandemic, and yeah, and various things in my life, which I won't get into at the moment, really depend on what happens with the pandemic. Uh, and maybe later that'll come up in the topic. What about you? Are you the optimist, Tagen?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people would consider me more an optimist than a realist. Sometimes I wish I was more of a realist, but I guess that's where I get my hopes and my dreams and my aspirations all come out of optimism, whether that's my hopeless romantic nature or whether that's just my over the top enthusiasm for a weekly radio series which we do. But anyways, regardless, I think you brought up some interesting points already of endurance, of resilience. I think Viktor Frankl, who we'll get into this evening, will be helpful in steering us in how to remain how to remain in the race, as it were, how to remain even in the midst of these uncertainties.
Yeah, thank you. So, this is your topic, Tagen, and I assume you've done some research and have some background in this, and I really don't know what to expect, and so I think first I'm going to let you do a lot of the talking, but second I'll throw in things that are true for me, then you can put them in context.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'll start with one short thing, and then you can comment on that whenever you want in your part of the presentation. I think one way that this pandemic has been difficult for me, and it's compounded by the political instability in our neighboring country, the United States, has been sort of a shaking of the foundation, I'm going to call it. It's a sense that what I thought I could count on, the foundation, the ground below me, right, is being shaken, and now I'm not sure that I can count on it anymore. I'm not sure I can count on the country, the society, the health care system to be able to be there for me on modern Western medicine. I thought I could count on it, but now it looks like it's been, if not defeated, it's been severely shaken by this little virus. And then likewise, the unstable political situation in the United States, under whose shadow we live here in Canada. We're not even sure what's going to happen tomorrow. I'm not 100% sure that who the president's going to be, even though many people say it's a done deal. I'm not so sure it's a done deal. So anyway, maybe you can put that into context. That it's sort of a psychological instability, a mental health issue.
Right. Well, first of all, I would say we as human beings, we are orchestrated towards structures and organizations because that's where we as human beings feel the safest. We feel the safest in organizations. I think the primary question here is, what do we put our trust in? Do we put our trust in politicians and medical systems? Although those are all important things, obviously, in the midst of this pandemic and political unrest in countries. But I would say though that those anxieties are always going to be there. We're seeing them in a more pronounced way than usual. So I think this is where the existentialist would say, well, that was your first mistake. You put your trust in something else other than yourself. You put your trust in things that we know will fail because they are run by humans, and we as humans have a universal human experience, a universal human condition. So unless you're going to take the metaphysical route, which Viktor Frankl will discuss the power in that, then the only person you really have to blame is yourself. to put it broadly.
But the idea that I am independent,
right,
and that I only need to trust myself, I'm going to suggest to you for your response is fallacious. It's a fantasy. The food that I eat, the shelter in which I live, the medical care which I've gotten and will likely need in the future, all of that depends on other people. It depends on the society and the structure around me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I would be alive today, and many of us would not be. Perhaps you wouldn't be if it wasn't for medical care.
Quite right.
I've had incidents in my life where I had an infection, I needed an antibiotic, and if I didn't get it, then who knows I might not be alive.
Yeah.
So Tagen, how is it possible to not be dependent, not be psychologically and emotionally dependent on the health and well-being and the functionality of the society around me, unless I live in a fantasy world? If I'm in the real world, I'm arguing I'm dependent.
But Mikey, is the world even real? That's another philosophical debate for another day. But yeah, in reality, you're basically asking me, and correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to straw man you. For anyone who doesn't know what that means, that's a general fallacy type of misrepresenting the other side's position so that it is more easily attacked and critiqued. But so what are you asking me? How do we then psychologically and emotionally separate ourselves from the circumstances we are in to better respond?
Not exactly. I'm responding to your assertion from earlier that my first mistake was being psychologically dependent or intertwined with society and the functioning,
Right.
the health and proper functioning of society, and the ability of the medical system to handle
Right.
health care issues. And my response is that, well, the reason I'm psychologically dependent on those things is because I am indeed dependent on those things.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be an illusion to think otherwise.
Right. And I entirely agree with you. And when I'm just stating the extreme position of the existentialist. I agree that I rely on the medical system. I rely on the tax-paying system. I rely on multiple government systems. The idea that I would propose to you, though, is the fear and anxiety we experience over these things rational? I'm going to make the claim that no anxiety is ever truly rational. Because anxiety itself, but this is coming from someone who is not discounting the importance of anxiety and dealing with that. But what does anxiety do? It hijacks the mind. It hijacks our ability to reason. So going to one of our favorite philosophers, aka Plato and Aristotle, Plato's idea of the three parts of the soul, mind, spirit, and desire. Right? The mind, the ability to reason, is the philosopher king. That is chief. But when our spirit is unsettled, whether that be emotionally or because, yes, society is shifting, society is changing, we can't do that. But what we can do is we can stay certain in who we are and what our identity is. We can attempt to look to find a silver lining. Although that is far easier to say than to do, for sure.
I'm going to take a different position than you, and I'm going to cite two authoritative philosophers who, well, the first one, Sartre, who we've talked about on this show many times, and another one, Spinoza, who both see a place for anxiety and angst and forlornness and anguish, and particularly Sartre. Sartre views those emotions, the existential angst and anguish and forlornness, as the impetus for finding one's human freedom and for finding meaning in life. That it's only after feeling or while feeling anguish and angst and the various flavors of those things that Sartre talks about, the knowing that that my decisions are decisions for all humanity, and knowing that there's no moral code to live by, I find my own way, and that there is no external meaning other than the internal meaning that I create, or there's no meaning except for the internal meaning I create. That those very scary and anxiety-provoking propositions are precisely what leads me to find meaning in my life and make use of my the remaining time that I have. And in the case of Spinoza, in the balance scale between emotion and rationality, does not say it should tip all the way in favor of rationality and we shouldn't feel emotion. To the contrary, it says that emotion is very important, but it needs to be tempered and balanced with rationality.
No, that's an accurate assessment, but I think my point still stands, even in Sartre's case. Because even in Sartre's case, you are taking that angst and anxiety and giving it a rationality. You do not let the anxiety itself drive you, but you let the purpose and the meaning behind that anxiety, the reason behind that anxiety, to strive to find meaning and purpose, to realize that you are fundamentally alone, forlorn, and in despair, to then make something of yourself. You are using that anxiety in the proper way to drive you to your ultimate conclusion or your ultimate finding. And I agree. It's similar to, say, someone like Immanuel Kant, and his later critics would say Kant's pursuit of the primary aim of human beings to pursue science, that gives us a meaningless world. I believe it was you who brought up Wittgenstein in his critique of Bertrand Russell and formal logic equations, to see the world as symbols. He said, but even that deprives us of meaning and experience, and I think that anxiety comes out of, is responsible for some of our key experiences, to bring us to the topic of I don't know, do you have anything to add to that before I transition into the New Year's topic at hand?
No, go ahead, and I'm sure we'll come back to this.
Okay. Oh yeah, well, every existentialist does. We're still looking for meaning every moment, every day.
Are you an existentialist?
I'm just a person by nature who experiences the existentialist world. But there you go. All right, so the topic for tonight is 2020. no, but it is somewhat related to that. Mikey and I thought, just because of New Year's, we would talk about what some philosophers might have to say about resilience, resilience of the human spirit in particular. As Mike and I have been talking, we've already touched on the topic of resilience and how do we run the race with endurance? How do we move towards the final aporia, the final roadblock, as Plato would put it? How do we find meaning and purpose in a time where there is so much uncertainty? So tonight I will be, and Mikey will be joining as well. I will be focusing on Plato, Viktor Frankl, and Martha Nussbaum. And when I move to all of those, I will reference what works I'm working through to give you those examples, so you can go and counter it for yourself, so you don't have to take my word for it. Because who am I anyway? But Nietzsche said something famously: no philosopher has ever been proven right. So I look forward to this I almost said debate. I don't think it'll be as much of a debate as a discussion. So I guess my first question for you, Mikey, is what comes to mind when you hear the word resilience? What comes to mind? Well, my iPad had a seizure there for a second. Thanks, technology. Appreciate that.
Well, that's part of resilience. Is do you have the capability to respond to and overcome and to continue functioning even when your iPad or your technology fails? So resilience is the ability to hopefully quickly adapt and respond to unforeseen failures, either in your technology or in the society around you, or in your own body, in your own emotional state, to have some mechanism in place, some ability, either because of like prior preparation or just because of intrinsic ability to respond and adapt to unforeseen threatening circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Resilience, to me, is an experience or an ability, as Mikey said, to adapt, to adjust, to continue on even when we experience hardship or turmoil. And we all know, I think it's safe to say, that 2020 has been one of the roughest years in the books for most of us. This has dramatically shifted our lifestyles, our understanding of how we interact with each other, and how we communicate. So this is kind of why I wanted to tackle this topic, because New Year's for me has always been a source of existential dread. I dislike New Year's Eve. I dislike it a lot because I always dread the worst. I always have anxiety that each year is going to be worse than the next. And there is some rationality to that because of how humanity operates. The good and evil exist, folks. That's gonna happen. So we're not gonna reach a state anytime soon where everyone is singing Kumbaya in the morning. You know, that's not gonna happen because humans are human. So, and in fact, when I get to Viktor Frankl, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about what he has to say about humans and the way they operate when we get into logotherapy and stuff like that.
Yeah. Proceed. It sounds like you have a lot to get into. A lot of philosophers to cover, so let's get going.
So let's start with our good friend Plato, shall we?
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about I would say one of the greatest, certainly one of the most high esteemed and well-known philosophers we have in our discipline. Plato, in his work, oh, I wish I could remember what it is. I think it's the Phaedo, but I will find out, and hopefully by the time Mike is editing, so he can put it in somehow. But anyway, one of his works. It's right after, it's right after Socrates has been sentenced to death for going against the government officials and corrupting the young and stuff like that. And so on the last night of his life, it's recorded that he has a conversation with his friends. And Plato discusses how in this world we cannot be free. But he says what prepares us for the freedom is the study of philosophy, the study of wisdom. Because he says freedom is freedom of the mind. Freedom of the mind, meaning the mind has been liberated to think and to question its existence, its meaning, its very purpose. And philosophy allows the prisoner. He describes the prisoner behind bars and entrapped in his mind, but philosophy is basically like a bird that flies in and frees him and liberates him from the bars and shackles. For Plato, we have to understand ancient Greek mythology to understand this, and mysticism, that human beings are on the wheel of torment. that we were at one point exiled gods and goddesses, but we were gods and goddesses, but we were exiled to Earth. We were banished, and so only in death can we truly be liberated. And and it's going to be interesting when I move to Viktor Frankl next. Well, no, actually, I'll move to Martha Nussbaum next. But to see that the pursuit of wisdom is how we experience freedom, because knowledge is power. If you read the Republic, you'll see that Socrates is critical of Thrasymachus when he says, well, might is right, essentially, is his argument, is that I have the strength and the ability to overwhelm, and therefore I can take what is mine. But Socrates' argument is one of, but knowledge is more powerful, because knowledge shapes people. It empowers people in a way that physical strength or intimidation, it changes people. That strength and intimidation just cannot. And basically, I would argue that Socrates is saying there, what is worth more to you? Is it your physical ability, or is it your ability to impact, influence, and to change the lives and the minds of the people around us?
Yeah, well, Socrates, of course, chose to go to his death rather than to deceive his country. Or, yeah, Athens, city-state. Because Socrates was offered a method for escaping his death sentence, but he would have had to use trickery and misrepresent. And one of the lessons that I got out of the story that Plato wrote about Socrates, because Socrates didn't write, so Plato was recounting the story, is what you just said, Tagen, that Socrates was more concerned with how would you say, with the liberation of truth, the liberation of integrity, the liberation and the freedom of acting according to one's conscience, even if it means dying, rather than living not in integrity. Now, that's one of my takes on this story about Socrates. That's, I believe, at least partially in contradiction to what Baruch Spinoza has written. Or is it Wittgenstein? I think I'm going to talk about Wittgenstein. So Wittgenstein says that death is not a part of life. That's Wittgenstein, right? Death is not a part of life. And or I forgot the exact words. Death is not an event in life. And what that means to me is that you cannot live to experience your death. You cannot live to experience being dead. I mean, if you're experiencing something, you're by definition alive. So you can't experience death, because once death happens, there's no experience. So I think that calls into question, or contradicts, or clashes with Plato's idea about Socrates, because what's the point of living in integrity and dying? Because when you die, you can't experience the fact that you've lived in integrity. Am I making sense? Once you're dead, it doesn't matter.
Well,
So why wouldn't it be preferable to live, even if you have to compromise your integrity to do so? Because there is nothing after that. You can't enjoy or benefit from your integrity if you're dead. And maybe I'm off topic here, but anyway, that was my response to the story
well,
about Socrates. Yeah.
that's a heavy question there, but I think it goes back to one of the very first shows you and I did together with a few others was the topic of legacy. Way back when. Wasn't that long ago, but it feels like a long time ago. And you kind of raised the same question. And I think I would say to that we do those things because we feel, some might feel called to that, or we feel responsible because we want to leave we want to lead a life that lifts others up to a higher understanding. We want to show the best of ourselves to people. And so even if it doesn't matter, as a matter of influence and a matter of presenting an image to encourage the next generation to think and to feel and to walk through life, we choose not to do certain things and to do others.
Yeah, so I think that Wittgenstein's statement that death is not an experience in life or not part of life is consistent with existentialist philosophy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it doesn't contradict the idea that it's important in while we're alive to live a meaningful life and be in integrity and so on. But I think where the problem arises with that I have a problem with is the idea that you put forth about Plato arguing that liberation comes through death, and others, and many others, especially religious people, often talk about death being some sort of liberation. But I think, according to Wittgenstein, it's impossible because you can't be anything when you're dead. Death is nothingness. It's not liberation. It's not anything other than nothingness. And so I can see having as a goal the way one lives his or her life, and which is a very existentialist position, finding meaning in life. But it should be, in the way I see it, for the purpose of meaning in life, not for some idea about what happens later when you're dead, and then there is nothingness. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a topic for another show because
Good.
I feel like that's a super deep rabbit trail which we could debate back and forth about for hours.
Okay.
I mean, that's been the great question of human existence from the very beginning. But I guess I would say on one final note before I move to Martha Nussbaum so we can get through everybody before our time rushes by. I would say that we as human beings, we hope. And by that hope that we might impact someone, or by that hope that there is life after death, whatever that hope is, we hold on to that hope because that hope is our certainty in the uncertainty. That hope is what we strive towards. So this is your debt, right? When you know what your purpose is, you pour yourself into that. So for me, being a philosophy student, hoping to go through graduate school and stuff like that. That's why I pour myself into projects like this, because it is my passion. It's my joy to pour myself into that, because I have hope of a goal. And so the reason we live of characters of virtue is A, it is just right, and B, it is, I think, partially so that we can influence others. But anyway, Phil, I don't know. Do you have any quick thoughts on that sentiment?
I just want to quickly refer back to our original discussion where I thought maybe you were more of an optimist and I was more of a pessimist. And then the question of resilience. And I'm going to suggest that hope, I'm being the skeptic and the pessimist. I'm going to suggest that hope oftentimes is the, how would you say, it contradicts or resilience, or it hinders resilience. And I'll tell you why. Because if I hope that our medical system has become so capable that no little virus can plow it down, if I hope that I'll always have the food supply I need by going to my local market, if I hope that human rights and democracy will prevail and continue and will protect me and my loved ones in this world, then that can lead me to a false sense of security. I'm living on hope. But what about reality? This 2020 has given me a dose of reality. And perhaps because I realize that my hope is not going to get me to where I need to go. The gas is running out of the tank here. The hope's running out. I need something other than hope for my gas tank. I need resilience. I need to actually prepare to be as resilient and as independent as possible, because I can't hope and rely upon these external things that I thought before 2020 I could rely upon. Anyway, back to you. That's my comment.
What you just said made me very, very sad.
Okay.
But it's accurate. and so this is where I think we're gonna talk about Martha Nussbaum very briefly, and then I want to talk about Viktor Frankl, because I think Viktor Frankl can help us understand this. So Martha Nussbaum is a contemporary philosopher. She's relatively young as well, which is a nice change of pace. Not having to read old guys' work all the time, although it is very profound. So the excerpt I'll be working from is her excerpt entitled, as I just lose the excerpt, this is great. Resilience right here is entitled Anger and Forgiveness, Resentment, Generosity, and Justice. So basically, what Martha Nussbaum presents in this idea of anger and forgiveness is she uses the story of Nelson Mandela and his time in prison, and how he wrote of his anger and his frustration. But Martha Nussbaum talks about anger in a few ways. The fact that anger is a fact and an emotion is that there has to be, not that there has to be, but there is an offense which is factual, but it is also an emotion. And that these two can't be separated, that anger can't just be an emotion, but there has to be a factual basis. It introduces the idea, I'm just reading off my idea of a wrongful act against something or someone. The wrongful act is is hurtful because it offends ourself. It offends us and our own ideals. And Martha Nussbaum, it's been a while since I've worked with this text. Can you tell? Gosh. But she talks about the idea that anger must be a transitional emotion. That we must use that anger. Because Nelson Mandela felt anger. He definitely felt anger. But what did he do with it? Instead of being angry at the guards for his sentence and his treatment, he decided to take that emotion, that wrongful act, and almost in a sense step outside of that to say, yes, this act has occurred, but I must change my way of thinking. Okay, I'm angry. Here's a better example. Say I'm angry at Mikey because he stole the last cookie or something. Very childish example, but it's the first one to come to mind. I can be angry, but that's not going to bring that last cookie back. My anger helps no one. So what am I going to do about it? Nelson Mandela then began to develop friendships with his guards. He began to talk with them, to listen to them, to share with them. And this is what he did in his presidency as well, even with his enemies. He welcomed them because he realized that they were people too. And that the anger he may feel towards them needed to transition into something far more powerful, which was a response to, okay, yeah, I'm angry, but how do I change this? How do I use this anger to change my country, to change my nation, so that we can move forward? So, to put it in the context of 2020 and resilience, we've been take this example. We have had to really limit our social interactions, like drastically. And they probably will, in a sense, never be quite the same. We can be angry about that. We can be, because it's... Seriously, my iPad has it out for me tonight. But, we could be angry about that, but how does that benefit us? So people decided, hey, let's do a Zoom call instead. We channeled that frustration or that desire to be in community, and we used it in a different way. This is what resilience looks like. For me in my own life, I have had unique struggles being a person with a physical disability, and experiencing some some unique experiences and some of the perceptions people hold of me and how those manifest. I could be angry about that, but I could also do what I do, which is I acknowledge that that's not a reflection of me as a person, but that's a reflection of their understanding. And what do I do to change that? If I really feel compelled, I will speak to them. I will try and counteract that perception. But to realize that every individual has their own struggles. It's not we cannot live in anger. We must learn to forgive. Is Martha Nussbaum's main point. Any thoughts on that, Mikey?
Yeah, I think our emotions are in some way analogous to our nerves. They're clues that something is right or something is not right. But they're not ends unto themselves. So
Right.
if I stick my hand on a flame and I feel pain, the purpose of the pain is to tell me to withdraw my hand before more damage is done. Pain is not an end unto itself, it's a warning system. Likewise, I'm going to suggest our emotions, especially when they're negative emotions, and positive emotions are notifications that something good's happening, but something like anger, which I would think most people agree is not a positive emotion, it's an unpleasant, it's an unwanted emotion. It's a signal to us that something is not right. Some need or needs of ours or others are not being met. So Nelson Mandela was angry because he had some needs which weren't being met. Whatever, justice and equality and things like that. So when you feel pain, you don't want to sit there and wallow in the pain. You want to acknowledge you feel the pain, understand what it is, and then take corrective action. Same thing with anger. And I'm supporting what you said. We're on this completely on the same page, Tagen, here. Anger is not something you want to say, oh, great, I feel angry. I'm going to spend 2 weeks feeling angry. Or bringing it to the pandemic, I'm going to spend the next month being pissed off and upset that I can't go to the bar and to the restaurant and the gym and that I have to wear a mask and all this stuff. Rather you say, this is an opportunity for me to adapt and become more resilient. What can I do instead to meet my needs? A Zoom call. Maybe it's not my first choice, but maybe it's the only choice. Anyway, go ahead. That's my comment.
I'm just looking at my slides on anger and forgiveness right now. And for Nussbaum, she presents the idea of irrational anger as there being 2 types. The road to payback, the road of payback, and the road of status. The road to payback is the false belief that the object or being that was damaged can be restored. For Martha Nussbaum, this is metaphysical nonsense. Payback won't bring anything back. Getting angry at someone you love for something they did to you, that's not going to bring that back. But there's also the road of status, downranking or lowering another to raise yourself up. It can work, but it is normatively defective. Very rarely will lowering a person's status to raise you up actually work. That does not help you deal with the anger inside your heart, inside your mind. And so transition anger can be well grounded if it is knowledge of an actual wrongful act and it is proportional to the wrong. This is a direct quote from Nussbaum now. Furthermore, even if it is well grounded, anger is only rational if it is transitional anger, a sense of outrage without any ill will towards the offender. I don't know actually if that's a paraphrase or not, but it's got a page number there. So this idea that you don't let that anger define the individual. You don't let the anger of the experience define the entire experience. Just like we have been able to experience some very unique things in quarantine and the pandemic. We can't let our emotions ruin the experience and the opportunities we have to say reflect on what is truly important
and to become more resilient.
Exactly. To we must rise above our emotions to reap the benefits of what time has given us. Ooh, we're running out of time.
Speaking of time, if you want to get to Frankl, we've got about less than 10 minutes. So let's, if you want to go to Frankl, if it's important, let's talk about Frankl.
Good goodness. Okay, Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl is or was, pretty sure he's deceased now, was a World War II Holocaust survivor. He was a Jewish doctor of psychology and developed a strategy, a method called Logotherapy, which is an offshoot of which actually builds off of, criticizes Freud, where he says the point, the basically the whole which exists within the human heart is the desire for meaning. It is the desire to have meaning and purpose. So in Viktor Frankl's work entitled A Man's Search for Meaning, he talks about how it is the search for meaning rather than Freud's emphasis that it is based on the base. Let me just pull it up here quickly now. Rather than being based on the acts committed in the past, rather than reflecting on the burdens of the past, the individual is longing and searching for meaning. Viktor Frankl writes that the life in the concentration camp tore open the human soul and exposed its depths. Is it surprising that in these depths we again found only human qualities which in their very nature were a mixture of good and evil, a rift dividing good from evil which goes through all human beings. So he ultimately sees that we as human beings struggle with good and evil, and how that affects our actions and our way we conduct ourselves. That struggle is true. Viktor Frankl develops logotherapy in an attempt to help clients reflect on their lives, to discover what their desires are, what their passions are, to really experience freedom. Here's another quote from Frankl. Freedom, this is him describing the day he was liberated from the concentration camp. Freedom, we repeated to ourselves, and yet we could not grasp it. We had said these words so often during the years we dreamed about it, but it had lost its meaning. Its reality did not meet. Basically, I got to paraphrase because we're running out of time. But he says that because of their experiences of the concentration camp, they no longer understood what freedom is. They no longer could they didn't experience the joy of freedom because the world in which they had dwelled, the world in which they had inhabited, did not match what they thought they would experience. One final quote from Frankl, which I find very interesting, is Frankl's view on religion. I'm sorry we didn't get through more of Frankl. Hopefully we can bring him up at a later show. But he says, the crowning experience of all for the homecoming man is the wonderful feeling that after all he has suffered, There is nothing he need fear except his God. So after we go through trials and tribulations, there really is nothing to fear, because Viktor Frankl saw firsthand that the only fear we have is the fear to our God, or the fear of death. But even then, is death, as Mikey said, something to be feared? It doesn't matter. Anyways, thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know that I spoke to whether death is something to fear, but I mean, my words could be interpreted as that death is something to fear because it's nothingness. People that believe that there's some kind of life after death, in a way, they have it good because they don't have to fear death so much, because the better world's to come, right? The heaven to come. But of course, I think the existentialist view is that it's really only this life that matters. I don't think I know Sartre didn't talk about God and life after death and so on. Existentialism is focused on quite the opposite, that we have a finite amount of time here. We better use it. It's all we got. So there's a comment on the YouTube chat. I often think of hope as hopium. Hopium. And so I'll my last comment, and then I'll give it to you to wrap it up. But my last comment is that I tend to think of hope as being somewhat naive, and I agree 100% that anger and hatred are expensive emotions that unless they become transitional very quickly, then they actually are counterproductive, because unless you can transition out of expensive emotions like hatred and anger, you're not actually able to make a change to prevent the situation from recurring, which caused the feeling in the first place. So what I'm getting out of 2020, the pandemic, the political instability, is a slap in a cold water thrown, a bucket of cold water thrown on me of reality. I'm not sure hope is the way I want to address it, but certainly resilience, adapting, and finding ways to move forward and not get stuck in depression or anger or expensive emotions, but move forward and become more resilient, to protect myself and to enable myself to live on, to live, not to die, but to live on, knowing that the things that I counted on maybe aren't so trustworthy. The stability of society, of the medical system, of the political world. Yeah, go ahead, Tagen.
My soft close would just simply be, as we enter 2021, hope can be used within reason. We would be foolish to think that everything is just going to be so much better come 2021. Obviously, we still got challenges ahead. But know for you as the individual that you have the ability to look for those silver linings. Let me encourage you to as you interact with people, choose joy. Choose freedom, which is to realize that you are worth something, and that you make what 2021 is going to be. It's not about what happens with the virus, what happens with everything else, but it's what you choose it to be. And remember Viktor Frankl's words that I just read. The joy for the homecoming man is that he needs fear nothing except his God and himself. All right. Bye, folks.
Yeah, thanks, Tagen Marshall. philosophy major at, I think you're a senior now, right? In your senior year at senior years at
Oh, I wish
upper
I'm
level,
a,
upper level.
yeah, yeah, I'm a weird hybrid anyway.
Vancouver Island University in Nanaimo. I'm Michael Robert Caditz, and by the way, we pre-record this show because I'm not ready to go. Tagen, I don't know about you, but I'm not ready to go back into the studio. I'm resilient and adapting to the reality and not denying reality, and I don't want to risk it to be in this little crowded studio. So we're pre-recording, and we do stream our actual recording here on the Canadian Philosophy Show YouTube channel. So check out YouTube and search for the Canadian Philosophy Show, and you can see us in video while we record this show. So thanks, and the show is broadcast on radio on CHLY 101.7 Nanaimo every Sunday evening from 7 to 8 p.m. And that it streams on chly.ca. So thank you very much, Tagen.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Feel free to leave comments after we've gone off. We'll try and get back to you.
Thanks.